welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games. Games that respect your time. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined by two awesome co-hosts, Nate Heininger. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm doing well. Glad to be here. It's been a little while.
Yeah, we are glad to have you back, Nate. Welcome back. Hope you had a great trip.
I did. I spent a lot of it playing the game that we're talking about today.
Awesome.
And I am also joined by Shane Kelly, my bro host and real-life twin brother. How are you doing, Shane?
I'm doing super great. Every time you say real-life twin brother, I wonder if you have a made-up twin brother somewhere.
I just like thinking of you as my real-life twin brother. Like it's like I have like a real-life clone.
I mean, you kind of do, right?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of true.
The amount that we talk about the fact that you guys are twins on this podcast is ridiculous.
Well, I do feel like sometimes it's good to say that so that people know what to picture, you know?
So when they're creating images in their head of what we all look like, they only have to right now make two images.
Exactly.
One for the two of you and one for me. Perfect.
So imagine one perfect Adonis with rippling abs and a luxurious radio voice.
And then what do you look like? Yes.
And two hideous trolls.
Sick burn. So this week we're talking about Warbits, which is an iPhone game, and it's one that I'm actually super, super excited to talk about because it's literally something that I have been waiting for since I first got an iPhone. You know, I got the iPhone with the iPhone 3G and picked up the phone and started thinking, well, what sort of games would be good on something like this? And at the time, I had a Game Boy Advance, which I played a lot.
And that's when Reagan invented the Endless Runner.
And it's worked out real well for me, guys.
Sitting on a pile of Cannibalt cash.
But I also thought at the time, like, the only Game Boy Advance game, and I was playing a ton of stuff on the Game Boy Advance in those days, and the only Game Boy Advance game where I thought this would be better on the iPhone was Advance Wars, because it's a multiplayer game. You take turns. It would benefit from a touchscreen, and it would benefit from having an internet connection to be able to play with people without being in the same room. And I thought, surely somebody is going to come out with exactly that, Advance Wars for the iPhone. I thought it back in 2008. And here it is, 2016, right on schedule. Finally, there is an acceptable game in that category.
So I've never played Advanced Wars, but that doesn't really matter because this is a great game in and of itself, and I would not have known that it was a newer version of an already existing game. I have been playing a ton of this game as well, so I think we should start by kind of explaining what it is, as we do on this show, and kind of what makes it so much fun. First of all, it's a turn-based, asynchronous kind of war game.
Yeah, so first off, I think in a lot of cases, asynchronous games are a little bit of a rarity, and this one, it takes that sort of asynchronous gameplay style that phone gamers are probably familiar with from maybe Words with Friends, and it applies it to like a war game that in a lot of ways is really similar to computer real-time strategy games.
Asynchronous games are not common on the iPhone unless they end with friends.
Yeah.
In which case, they are probably one of the most popular genres of games, because about every 3 months or so, a new with friends game comes out, and everybody plays it like crazy, and then about 3 months in, you look down at your phone and you've got like 14 open games of drawing with friends or whatever, and everyone's deleted the app within that amount of time, and a new one comes out, and you do it all over again. But this is a way more advanced game than a chess mod or a checkers mod or Pictionary mod that goes back and forth. This is a developed and well thought out combat strategy game.
And that's not to say that it's super complicated. Like, I've played a lot of real-time strategy or games that are more sort of tactical combat oriented, and a lot of the times they have a lot of complexity that kind of turns me off. Like I only was begrudgingly dragged into playing Civilization 5 by Nate, and I mean I eventually found I really really liked it a lot, but it's the sort of game that initially is tough to grasp. But Warbits, like its predecessors in this genre, is so perfectly stripped down. Like it's really taking a combat game, a tactical top-down strategic combat game, and taking it as simple as it can possibly go without making it completely arbitrary or unfun. Like there's a lot of depth and strategy here, but really there's how many units are there in this game? Like,
yeah, I was just trying to think of the breakdown of that. So I mean, first of all, there's 3 types of units, and you have infantry, mech, and air. Now within those, there's different versions. There's like light infantry, there's heavy infantry. Mech could be an artillery gun, or it could be like a fast moving, light mech. But
yeah,
they have
the difference between direct damage and ranged damage is also a big divider in this game.
And they all have strengths and weaknesses that are very clearly marked when you look at like the item's description or the unit's description. So like, a light mech, it'll say, plus against infantry, negative against mech and air. A heavy mech will be plus against infantry and mech, but -1 against air. It's all the kind of like rock, paper, scissors breakdown. So it's super easy to understand what's good against what. But there are enough units, and they all have different. This is a tile based game essentially. It's a fully rendered landscape, but everything is a grid, and things have movements.
Square grids, and very very small square grids. You're never going to be moving for 4 or 5 turns in order to get over to somebody's base. Everything is sort of within reach for your units.
Yeah, there's also a fairly small number of different types of terrain. It's you're going to have forests, mountains, water, and plains. I think that's it. There's also clouds sometimes.
Well, there's the standard fog of war type thing that comes with these games. You can't, if you have it turned on, you can't see what you aren't currently standing in or haven't explored. And then, clouds, you can put air units in, and the enemy can't see them unless they're right next to it. And all this adds enough complexity where it is kind of in your hands, whether you win or lose. It really is me against you, whoever aligns their units the best way.
Yeah, in the campaign mode, most of the different battles can be won in like 10 turns or less.
Yeah, for the most part.
It gets a lot harder the farther you get in.
It does.
And
that's one of the things I think that stays the same though. Like I got to a point where I was having to look up how to beat levels on YouTube, and even still those levels were short, very short in terms of the number of turns. If you got into a place where you were taking a lot of turns to play a level, you probably weren't doing it right.
Yeah, I have a game still going with a random player, and we'll talk about the online play in a little bit because it's kind of unique. But we are currently on turn 43, which is insane because, like Shane said, most of them do end quickly, but we got into this like stalemate, and it's just been endless. But that's not a good representation. Most of these games can be finished pretty quickly, or if they're not, you kind of know who's winning and might bow out because you can get a little overwhelmed.
So obviously we don't want to spend a ton of time just comparing this game to Advance Wars, but I do want to say at this point that like if you know Advance Wars, like I played other games that also did this, like that did a top-down strategy game. One that we could talk about a little bit is like Hero Academy, and there's others where you are doing a top-down strategy oriented turn-based game, but this is so close to Advance Wars that you can really just look at the units, and if you know what the similar looking units from Advance Wars do, you'll be comfortable with what these units do. There's very little difference in terms of strategy. Now, there are little subtle things that are different. I'm not like an expert in Advance Wars, but this is close enough to Advance Wars that I immediately felt at home from those games. And Shane and I used to play a lot of Advance Wars.
We did. It was a perfect game for the 2-player pass and play experience with a Game Boy Advance, which is Reagan's favorite console of all time, and I would say is my contender for favorite console of all time.
Did you guys each have your own, or
We
did you
did.
have to share?
Mm-hmm.
Did
We
you
did
have
it,
the same color?
but the nice thing about it was that this could play
We only had one copy of Advance Wars, though.
Yeah, we could either play pass and play or with a cable. But really, the pass and play was the better experience because you're going to be taking turns anyway. If you're doing that, like, what is the guy on the other end of the cable doing while you're playing your turn? Nothing. But the nice thing about the Game Boy Advance was, you could be sitting on the couch watching a movie and pass the Game Boy Advance back and forth, each playing a turn. And, it was just a perfect thing for its time. Now, with it being on your iPhone, it's even better because, you get the little notification, you can pop into the app, play your turn, pop out, and go back to, scrolling through Twitter like I endlessly do.
Yeah, and the turns take, 1 minute maybe to do your turn. I mean, depending on even as low as 15 seconds when a game has first started. So it's really easy to have a ton of games going.
Yeah, when you look at the board, you'll have a pretty good idea of what you could do and what the only thing that you might have to keep track of or read into is what units that you're ready to buy at that point. You know how much money you have, but you'll know how many cities you have. You'll know how much, where your units are. You'll know what units you have. You don't have to do a lot of you don't have to do any inspecting of units, which I hadn't really thought about that. I think it's actually a really good point. It makes the game really easy to pop in and out of the different matches. And that really supports this sort of asynchronous play style.
Also, we haven't talked about the art, which is really nice. It's really solid.
Yeah.
It's
I like the
very
art better
simple.
than the original Advance Wars, frankly.
Yeah, me too. And that's kind of odd to say, but the Advance Wars had the limitation of being on a really low resolution screen.
Let's not talk negative about Advance Wars here. I mean, come on,
It was a great game, but we're talking about a game that is on a nice Retina screen, and so it really takes advantage of that. All the units are really expressive and detailed. You can zoom all the way out, and you can still tell exactly what everything is, but you can also zoom in and see sort of cuteness to them. And the backgrounds and other art has this sort of kind of, what it reminds me of, and this is a weird thing to compare it to, but Google's material design that they talk about for all of their interface design. It's kind of like things look like things. It's not skeuomorphic, but things look like they're made out of something rather than they don't need to look like they're made out of mahogany, but they have a slight sort of underlying texture, even though they're kind of flat. This has that kind of look to me. Things look like, not exactly like a paper cut or something like that, but they look like they're made out of something. They look really well done. And I really like the art, and the music is okay, although I have now turned it off.
Yeah, I like the music. It's you're listening to it in 15-second bursts, so I think there's some really catchy, really nice little background songs composed, and there's a lot of different ones, depending on what map you choose, because there are, for the multiplayer, a ton of different maps.
Ton of maps, pretty good campaign mode. I actually haven't completed it yet because I'm kind of stuck on one of the later levels, but the campaign is really each level, it functions as a tutorial, but it also throws interesting challenges at you every time. And until the level that I got a little bit stuck on, every level it felt fair, but it was also challenging, and so I'd play the level 2 or 3 times and eventually beat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely lost several times while going through the campaign, and sometimes pretty terribly. You can definitely get beat by the computer in this game, and then it mocks you because they do the silly I don't know, like meme culture language where the your guy and the bad guy are arguing about like what's better, ketchup or mustard.
Yeah, that's kind of cute and funny. The I guess sort of frame story is that Warbits is a war simulator where the advanced warriors of the future are able to settle their differences through digital battles that don't kill anyone, and so you're battling over differences of opinion, such as which condiments are best.
It's beautiful, really.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that aspect of it, and that makes the hashtag system to be something a little more fun, because you could have a hashtag for ketchup v mustard if you want, and you could go to war with other ketchup and mustard lovers.
The hashtag system is really it's really innovative. Like, I don't think I've seen that before in a game like this. And so the way that works is that you can just play online on their general leaderboard, which is hashtag Warbits. And that's the main leaderboard. If you start a multiplayer game and tag it hashtag Warbits, you're in the largest sort of lobby, if you will, or like the largest matchmaking pool. But you can create your own or use any number of sort of preset hashtags that tag your game with some information about it. Sometimes they're things like Fog of War, and you know that those are going to be games with Fog of War turned on. But you can also create your own. So we created one for hashtag short game. And because we were all playing games, starting new games under hashtag short game, it was matching us with other people who had also tried to start games with hashtag short game. So just us. And it kept a special leaderboard just for us, which was
Should
really
we take
cool.
a look at that? Should we look at the leaderboard?
Yeah. I don't know.
Let's look at the leaderboard.
No, we don't need to go there.
No, I just thought we'd take a look at it real quick.
All right, you twisted my arm. What's it say right now, Nate?
Well, we've got Shane coming in with 1,050 points. We've got Reagan coming in with 1,450 points, 1,450, and then it's me with 3,450 points.
You wounded me, Nate. Nate is
right.
a
That's
monster
Nate
in
with
this game.
3 wins, Reagan with 2 wins, and me with
I know we
only
haven't
1
played
win.
a whole lot.
You know,
but
it's
when
funny.
I win, I've
the
crushed
point
you guys.
system is interesting because it's not just counting your wins. It is counting like how many units you kill, and other things I think also generate points. I'm not entirely clear, but
It's
like,
pretty much anything good. If
Yeah.
you kill stuff, there's a power-up system that we haven't talked about, but when you kill things, you earn charges, and then those charges can go towards unique power-ups, like your infantry do 25% more damage this turn, or the one that I use pretty much 100% of the time is turned into straight cash. It adds kind of a element of surprise to it.
I noticed you were cashing out every single time you got any of those points.
So I want to talk about that for a second because I do think that I've kind of got pretty good at this game pretty fast, and it's because I think I have played. I look at this like a resource management, almost like board game, and I really like those style of board games. And at the end of the day, all that matters is how much money are you generating, and you can generate money by capturing towers, killing things, or just cashing those charges out. And I know every once in a while those power ups are good for other things. But I'd just rather have more units on the board than you. So that's why I do the cash out thing. Like, have you guys played a lot of Axis and Allies by any chance, the board game?
No, not much. I played it one time years ago.
Okay, I've played that game a ton, and I love that game. And a lot of that is, like, balancing out your infantry against your heavy troops to, like, get the best bang for your buck out of the heavy troops. And this is not exactly the same because you're obviously, like, you can attack as armies in that game. But I think some of the tenets apply here, and I don't know. I've really been enjoying this.
Yeah,
game.
I've been trying to adopt that your strategy, seeing it work so well. But I do like that it really gives you some flexibility. That charge system, I think, is the biggest thing that is different strategically between this and Advance Wars. I know that wasn't in Advance Wars 1. I don't think that there was anything similar in Advance Wars 2 either. So I think it's
Well, there
totally
was something
original.
a little bit similar in Advance Wars 1. In Advance Wars 1, each of the different commanders that you had would charge up a special ability. And so it was kind of the same as this. There was some kind of special ability that you'd kick in at a certain point, but instead of picking what you wanted to spend it on at a certain point, you picked at the start of the match what sort of commander you wanted. So there was the big brute guy that he would say, "Roll, tanks, roll," and all of his tanks would move twice as fast for a round. Or I don't know. I think the main guy, like his infantry units were buffed, stuff like that. I do think this is more interesting because it does give you that flexibility, like to play in response. So, maybe Nate, 9 times out of 10 you'd cash out, but maybe that one time you want your infantry to capture cities faster because you've got a couple of infantry on cities. So I think that is a good aspect of this game compared to the Advanced Wars that you and I grew up on.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice system, and some of I haven't tried nearly all of the options, but there's some really interesting ones. You can buff almost any of your units, but all of them only last one turn. It's not like something that's going to transform your entire game. And interestingly, you really need to be careful about when you do it, because if you fire that off at the end of your turn, then you've wasted it because it's going to be it's only going to last until the end of your turn. And I have done that by mistake a couple of times, and regretted it. But it's a really neat system. I think it definitely adds to the game. Although I think you can also turn it off in the settings for multiplayer.
Yeah, you can turn off that, and you can turn on or off Fog of War.
You can also, depending on the maps, have games that either include or don't include air units, and there's a bunch of other things that you can kind of customize. It has a really nice selection of maps and really customizable multiplayer. And speaking of the multiplayer, we should say this is based on Game Center. Game Center has its problems. I found this worked pretty well, but there's a lot of multiplayer games like this that use Game Center. I used that a whole lot for Letterpress. Shane, do you remember Letterpress? God, I played so much Letterpress.
Yeah, definitely. Letterpress. Who made Letterpress again? I can't remember.
The same guy who made Tweety, but I don't remember. Oh, Lorne something?
Richter?
Maybe.
I love Letterpress as well. I love a good word game.
Yeah, that was a great word game because it was so kind of amorphously freeform, and the simple UI was really fun.
It's just good design. Yeah, just really good design.
Yeah, it was fast to play.
Lauren Brichter, sorry. That's it. It was Lauren Brichter. There we go.
I was right. Say I was right.
You were right. Amazing game. That was a really clever game because he really stepped in just when Apple introduced, Words with Friends had been big, and Apple responded to it by introducing a feature in Game Center. And I think that Game Center was actually introduced before it had the ability to do asynchronous multiplayer as a system-wide feature. But the idea was that, and it has worked on and off, and it has worked sometimes well and sometimes not well. But the idea was that there'd be a system-level feature where you'd have a buddy list for games that you can maintain across games without having to reestablish a new account for every game. That works pretty well. And also, it kind of provides a Apple-backed backend for doing push notifications for turns and handling some of the server stuff, so that a game like Warbits or Letterpress doesn't have to do that work of creating a system for managing turns entirely from scratch with their own servers. That part of Game Center sometimes works really, really well and sometimes doesn't. I have had situations where Game Center-based games just mysteriously stop working for weeks. There was one period, I think, where Apple broke Game Center completely with an update for tons of people. And most games that relied on certain Game Center features just stopped working for those folks. So it can be flaky. If you've had a real hard time with Game Center games, I could imagine thinking twice about spending the $3.99 that this game costs. But I found that it's working really well under iOS 9. I get push notifications for all of my turns. They seem to come in on time. I've had a couple of situations where I had to fool with Game Center a little bit, like sign out and sign back in. But mostly, the online component of this game works really, really well.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I've had some issues where I miss a notification, and I can't seem to get the red badge to show on Warbits itself, which...
Yeah, I've had that same issue.
Which isn't a huge deal, because for the most part, I'm looking for these turns, and when someone plays, I I try to get to it right away because it really can be done in like 15 seconds. Of course, it's an asynchronous game, so sometimes I will be like, oh, I'll get to that later, and then it'll be like 6 hours later before I actually do the turn, and it happens vice versa. So, sometimes you just have games that sit in limbo for days, and that's just a issue of the genre. Like, I don't really think there's a way to fix that. But the multiplayer UI within the game itself, all Game Center aside, is great. I mean, you can see your games, you can see whose turn it is, you can see how long it's been since the turn, you can see the hashtag. It's great. I thought the overall UI of this game has been awesome. Every once in a while, I'll mistap something, and like part of me wishes there was a oops, like go back. But that would change like the whole game, because if you could like undo,
there's
moves,
randomness involved in attacks.
Yeah, like I wouldn't expect them to let me undo attacks, because it is like a roll of a dice type thing on a lot of those. But every once I'm like, damn it, I moved my guy one to the right when I was just trying to like tap clear. And again, this is mostly just me, but like I do it enough where I click the wrong thing. Or the worst one is if you move a hurt guy onto a full guy, they just absorb each other into a full health guy.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem ever worth it to me. I don't know why you would ever do that.
Well, that's something that makes a lot more sense from...
If you're playing defensively.
Well, it makes sense from Advance Wars. Like, in Advance Wars, each of these units has like 10 health, right? But in Advance Wars, that's actually representing 10 dudes. And then when you actually fight, it cuts to a little scene where you see those 10 dudes picking each other off. And that's something that I really miss from Advance Wars. I kind of wish this game had that.
They did that in the Risk video game. Did any of you guys play the Risk computer game from like 1996?
No, I did not.
You would,
no, sir.
Yeah, not to side rail, because it would try to get into like 3D, and you would do like your army of, Revolutionary War, like era looking guys, because they have like cannons and stuff, and they would do a full thing where they're just in a line, just shooting at each other, and it would take like 3 minutes for the whole thing to be done. And it was great. I have not heard of any other game doing that, nor have I even thought about that game since like 1998. So
I miss it in Advance Wars, because like in this game, I really like those moments where it kind of zooms in and you see like the two sides kind of shooting at each other. In Advance Wars, it would even kind of vary the backgrounds, so that like if you had one dude standing in a city and another guy standing on the field outside the city, then you'd see a little tableau with like 10 dudes standing on a city street, and then the city street kind of ends, and then there'd be some field, and there'd be people shooting from the field, and it was all very cute. And I kind of miss that here, but it also keeps the game really moving quickly. Like, that was something that if you were really playing fast in Advance Wars, you turned off anyway.
You'd skip that every time, yeah.
Yeah, there are some problems that I've had with the game. You mentioned some tapping issues, and I have that for... One thing that really happens a lot to me here is that I'll tap to move. So each of your units can move once and then also attack. But the problem is if you tap it to move and then don't tap on what you want to attack, if you accidentally tap like next to the thing you want to attack, it deselects that unit, and there's no way to reselect him in order to have him do his attack. He's just skipped his attack. And that's happened to me a few times and really frustrated me.
Yeah, and with moving too, so like it defines a path for you. And so like a light mech can move 6 squares. And I wish that I could move 3, reevaluate, and move another 3, but it's kind of like you have your one move. If you move one space over, that's your whole move. You don't get to use those other 5. Mm-hmm. And so,
yeah, that's annoying, especially when you're in fog of war and you go somewhere and it's like, oh shit, there's a guy in the tree I'm walking right past, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Well, I hope I remember that there's a guy in that tree when I take my next turn in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Or you just want to position, because basically guys can, since it's a grid, you can only attack from 4 sides. And sometimes you want to like, I want this ship to attack from the bottom so that it frees up the left side for my lesser movement thing to get over there. but you can't define it. It just kind of picks what side it wants to attack. And this is
That's not true. That you can move and then attack.
kind of. This is obviously
You can tap if you tap and move into a square next to another unit, then you can still tap on that unit and attack it.
well, maybe then, listeners, I have been doing it wrong, so I will reevaluate that.
Yeah. All this stuff, though, is really like finer points. Like these are the tiny little like finicky usability details that come up with a 1.0 game that I'm hoping they actually help with some of this stuff, maybe. Another thing I'd like to see would be a better in-game chat system. It's got a clever idea for the chat, which is that as you play your turn, you can say messages at any point throughout your turn. And then when somebody watches the replay when it's their turn, they see all of your actions and see the chat messages that you said as a part of the replay. Like you can, say something like taunt them, attack them, taunt them, attack them, taunt them, attack them, and they see that replay in real time, or not in real time, like in the replay. But unfortunately, there's no log of those messages. You can't go back and look at them later. And even more bafflingly, if it's not your turn, you can go in and send messages, and those go into the void. They literally are never shown or saved. If you don't say your message during your turn, it simply disappears. Completely baffling UI choice. Like I do not understand how that got past them. But they say, I think that they're gonna add a chat log. I just don't know when that's coming.
Yeah, I hope they do that soon. I asked you guys before we started recording if you'd been getting my Warbits witticisms, and it seems like
no. I think it seems like the really natural thing to do would be like, I've played my turn, I hit done, and then send a message, right? And it lets you do that. But if you do that, your message simply disappears. It gives you no indication that your message isn't being delivered. Your friends never see the message on their end. So you literally have to send the message before you end your turn. Otherwise, and not send it during your friends' turns. Otherwise, your message is simply gone. Really baffling. But once you know it's going on, I mean, it's okay. It's just really weird.
Yeah, because when it works, it's cool. It's fun to kill somebody's unit and then write like ha 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 ha, like right after killing it, and they see it in that order where they watch their unit get destroyed, and then it says ha 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 ha. It's perfect. Mm-hmm. It's just it should save it and allow me to read it later, or there should just be a separate chat box for just like fun back and forth,
Mm-hmm. And Shane and I played a ton of Carcassonne on the iPhone, and it has a really simple, really totally usable chat system that's basically that. And we were maybe going to wrap up a little bit by talking about some of our other favorite games in this gameplay style. I don't think you can call this a genre, but like asynchronous multiplayer games. Carcassonne for the iPhone by the Coding Monkeys is the best example of this genre ever. It's like $10 on the iPhone, which is not cheap, but it's universal for iPhone and iPad. You can play in person on an iPad, or you can play like pass and play, or you can play asynchronous over the internet. And the asynchronous multiplayer is flawless. Every feature is incredibly polished. All the graphics are incredibly beautiful. It is probably, if I had to point at what is the best iPhone game, I would probably say, or in terms of just like polish and like incredible attention to detail, I would say it's the Carcassonne iPhone game. It's amazingly good. But I bring it up now because it has a really good chat system built in, and I really wish these guys had looked a little more at how that game does chat before kind of boggling my mind with this incredible weirdness of just, oh, you sent this message, but it's not your turn. Okay, we will accept your message and then do nothing with it.
Somewhere in the Warbits dev studio is just like a mail carrier just full of all of our messages.
I just imagine they've got like a printer on the wall that prints them out and then funnels them into a shredder, and then it goes into their recycling bin.
That seems like a good use of resources. I bet that's what they do.
But apart from that, I'd say that the UI in this game is really solid, and it's a really great game, and you should definitely pay them $4 for it and play it on your iPhone.
And play us.
Yeah.
Hashtag short game. I would love to play some games with you guys.
Yeah, we are going to continue tagging our games hashtag short game, and if you're going to play it, start a game with us.
Yeah, you guys will go up against Nate, and he'll own you, and you're going to go up against me, and you'll destroy me.
We already brought it up, but one of my favorite asynchronous games ever on the iPhone is Hero Academy. That's another fun game.
That's the same people that make the Orcs Must Die games, which are also super fun, but totally not asynchronous. I haven't played their newest one, which, like, I think they went free to play with MOBA influence, and then just was like, oh no, I'm done, thanks. But Orcs Must Die 1 and Orcs Must Die 2 are super fun, and Hero Academy was sort of a thing they kind of tossed off in between the two. Like, they did Orcs Must Die 1 in 2011 and Orcs Must Die 2 in 2012, and somewhere in between they found the time to make Hero Academy for the iPhone, and it was really, really good. A really nice little top-down tactical kind of chess-esque, but like, you know, fantasy battle-oriented kind of thing. Really good.
Yeah, how long did Orcs Must Die take to beat? I really enjoyed that game. I wonder if it'd be worth revisiting.
Oh, the first one was pretty darn short. So yeah, that might be a contender for the show. I actually liked the first one in some ways better than the second one. They added a lot of really neat new traps and stuff in the second one, but it also added a lot to the length and complexity. But Orcs Must Die 1 and 2 are both really fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those games. And
we already mentioned Letterpress, which is probably my second favorite after Carcassonne. But let me see. Oh, one game that I played an absolute insane amount of that unfortunately is no longer available on the App Store. It just breaks my heart when that happens to really good apps. But there was a game called Samurai, which was, you know, very difficult to Google because there's Samurai this and that all over the App Store. But Samurai by Reiner Knizia, the famous board game designer, it's a wonderful board game, really, really good board game if you're looking for something sort of abstract, but with a little touch of theme that's just really, really strategically interesting. And it made a wonderful iPhone game, and it had asynchronous multiplayer that worked super well. I played a ton of that, both with my wife and with Shane, and I'm heartbroken that it's no longer available because I guess they must have shut down the servers. I searched, it's no longer on the App Store.
Yeah, that's disappointing. I know there's like this whole new like concept of like game archivists, mm-hmm. Who like their goal is to save games because as the technology expands, like they just don't exist anymore. And I wonder if that's going to happen for like iPhone games.
It's going to be really hard because iPhone games are so locked down in the way that they're distributed. Like you can't, you know, put a copy onto a floppy drive and then stick it on your shelf. It's on your phone or it's not on your phone.
It's true. There's going to come a time where a game for the Commodore 64 is going to be more accessible than a game for the original iPhone.
That time is already now. Like, you know, Samurai, if you want to play this game, you are out of luck. And
you'll have to get the board game.
Yeah. I mean, that's a helpful thing in this case. But like Hero Academy had a month almost where the servers went down. And I follow Robot Entertainment on Twitter, and they said, oh, hey, sorry, we'll try to get that back up when we can. But like, it hasn't been updated for newer OSs, and presumably they're just keeping the servers running for those diehard fans who continue to play it. But it doesn't look like it's probably long for this world. If you haven't tried Hero Academy and you want to, you should probably try it pretty soon, because I would bet on it going the way of Samurai before long.
So keep buying those microtransactions.
I guess so. And that is the thing. Like, these are all games so far that we've mentioned that have a price tag, but no like monetization model. Like you're not paying per move or anything here. So eventually, you know, the sale of the app itself can only pay for the server to exist for so long. I guess on that dour note, there was one more game that I wanted to mention that I really like.
Doom.
If you
your games are doomed.
If you're really sad about Samurai, and I know I am, the consolation was that Small World for the iPhone and iPad is really good, and it's also an excellent board game to app transition. When they first came out with Small World for the iPad, and it was iPad only at first, it didn't have online multiplayer. And then they actually did a Kickstarter campaign to do a sort of new version of the app where they added online multiplayer and a bunch of other cool new features. And I'm really glad that they did, and it ended up being a free update for people who'd bought it already, which was nice. It's a really polished app, not quite as polished as Carcassonne, but still really good. So that's another excellent board game. I love it as a board game, and I love it as an app, and the multiplayer is spot on.
I've never played the app version of Small World, but that is a fantastic board game. So maybe I'll check out the app. It is, and obviously it makes sense, but it is interesting how many of these good, not Words with Friends, well, actually, including the Words with Friends, are basically app versions of popular board games.
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way to get a concept that already works in a turn-based kind of way. And also, I mean, it probably helps with marketing, because if it's a popular board game, then folks already know the rules. You don't have to kind of bring them in, and you've got at least some market of people that are already probably willing to give your game a shot.
Yeah, definitely. The board game aficionados are a powerful legion.
Well, they are willing to spend some money. I mean, those things are not cheap. Like,
no joke.
Buying a $5 iPhone game can sometimes seem pricey, but if you're like, oh, $5, the print copy of this game is like $45, then it seems like an incredible bargain.
Very true. Much easier to get your friends to buy a $5 game than it is to convince people to buy $200 worth of miniatures.
Yep.
Is that a problem that you run into a lot, Shane?
That's a problem that I have fallen for that in the past. I have been that friend.
Oh, yeah. That's a bad trap to fall into, Shane.
Does anybody want a Cawdor army? I'll give it to you for cheap.
So I know there's tons of other asynchronous multiplayer games that I'm not thinking of. I mean, there are, you can go all the way back to like play by email games. I even think there was a version of Civilization 2 that had play by email, I think. And there's this is an idea that has been around a long time in other forms, and I think there's zillions of games in this genre. If you have a favorite, you should let us know. We have a feedback form on our website, and we are always game to try these sorts of games. So if you have a game that you really like and you want to maybe start a game with these dorks from this podcast, we're probably game. Let us know. Also, while you're at it, leave us an iTunes review. You'll be on the website anyway, right? To do the feedback form?
Beautiful
It's right
segue.
there. Thank you. Yes, I pride myself on my smooth segues into self-promotion. And while I'm on the self-promotion, I'm Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on Twitter at ReaganK. That's RayGank. Nate, where can people find you?
Also on Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And thank you so much for joining us once again on this episode of The Short Game.